Wind, 3 knots, heading 274. Range, 95 meters. Projectile mass, 89 kilograms. Trust me.
These 2 words set the entire stage for Titanfall 2, both inside the game and out. It's not often that you can apply a theme to a project and to the people making it, but Titanfall 2 does it with both style and grace. The game is a follow-up to the admittedly mediocre Titanfall 1. Critics liked it, and it sold well enough to justify a sequel, but the general public wasn't as impressed. People criticized the gameplay for not being all that innovative, even with the addition of Titans, which are giant, hulking robots equipped with all sorts of guns and swords. The game also caught some flack for having a small amount of maps, weapons, and what we're going to be focusing on in this video, a lack of a proper story mode. So, going into the sequel, most people's trust in Respawn was wavering. Consumers weren't expecting much, and neither was EA, if the near sabotage of the production is any indication. They scheduled a release date right between the AAA blockbusters of Battlefield 1 and the very similar Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. So it came as a surprise to a lot of people, myself included, when Titanfall 2 dropped not only with a proper campaign, but with one of the most well-realized and memorable stories I've seen in a video game in years. It's all wrapped up in a perfect little bow with great gameplay and absolutely masterful voice acting in a way that I feel warrants a lot more coverage than it's gotten up to this point. Call it me trying to find dramatic irony where there isn't any if you'd like, but I don't believe it's a coincidence that Respawn wrote a story entirely revolving around building trust at a time where most people's trust in them was faltering. They made some really smart choices, especially in terms of the writing and casting that won them back the good faith of the masses. For a little while, at least. But why is the voice acting in this game so good? What choices are made that make it stand out from everything else on the market right now? And, for the sake of a title drop, how does Titanfall 2's voice acting make you care? Well, in order to answer all of that, the first thing we need to establish is context. And to do that, we need to talk about character. The game loosely follows up on the events of the first Titanfall, keeping a lot of the same factions and names while telling a standalone story. From the very first minutes of Titanfall 2, Jack Cooper is already expressing his adoration for the Frontier Militia's pilots. Only being a rifleman himself, Cooper wastes no time in explaining how pilots are the heroes of the battlefield and the ones who control the Titans that give them a bit of an edge over the corporatist invaders of the IMC. The IMC is responsible for subjugating all of the human colonies that aren't Earth, destroying them for resources and precious metals that they can use to advance their military. The militia pilots, and consequently their Titans, are one of the only things preventing the IMC from taking over the galaxy, and Cooper is very understandably fascinated with them. His admiration never delves into jealousy or obsession, though. Cooper dreams of being a pilot and is working hard to rise up through the ranks and become one himself someday. He's secretly taught under Pilot Lastimosa, a long-serving member of the militia and someone who's much, much cooler than Cooper. Lastimosa's been a seasoned pilot for many years, he speaks in a low, laid-back Australian accent, and the other members of the militia treat him as a legend, giving him nothing but absolute respect. Contrast that with Cooper. In spite of his best efforts, he's still just a rifleman grunt, and he gets treated like one. He gets yelled at by his fellow soldiers for not being able to pull his own weight. He crashes an entire VR simulation just by trying to call down a fake Titan. And, perhaps most unforgivably, he plays on easy mode.
It's time you learn the other half of being a pilot. Titan. Let's go call one in.
Aren't pilots the only ones allowed to do that?
It's only a simulation, rifleman. It's not the real thing.
It's clear that Cooper, for all of his practice and good intentions, still has no idea what he's doing. And all of this is masterfully communicated to the audience through Matt Mercer's performance. For those of you that are familiar with the voice acting scene, you've definitely heard of him at one point or another. And for those of you that haven't, here's a quick primer. Matt Mercer is one of those voice actors who's completely ubiquitous, alongside people like Nolan North or Tara Strong. The guy is in just about everything, and I mean everything. Overwatch, Fire Emblem, Persona 5, Attack on Titan, Critical Role, Dragon Ball, Fallout, Batman, Street Fighter, Fate, JoJo, you name it, he's in it. And with good reason, too. He's an absolute delight to listen to in just about every single role he gets, getting the emotions and motivations of his characters across purely through their voices in a way that seems borderline effortless. Matt Mercer has spent years honing his craft, and there's no doubt that he's at the absolute top of his game right now. But if you look closer at a lot of these roles that he does get, you start to notice a bit of a pattern. You see, characters like McCree and Hit and Jotaro all have a lot of common elements shared between them. They all speak in smooth, lower registers, they tend to stay calm and composed under fire, and they almost always sound like their lines are coming from the most experienced and confident guy in the room. Now, if you're perceptive, you'll probably note that that sounds a lot more like Pilot Lastimosa than Jack Cooper. We've already established that Cooper is the mirror opposite of Lastimosa. Where Lastimosa is relaxed, Cooper is tense and eager to please. Where Lastimosa is experienced, Cooper is underprepared and overwhelmed. So why, then, did Respawn decide to make Matt Mercer play Cooper? Don't get me wrong, he does an excellent job, for reasons I'll dig into a bit later, but he's definitely playing against type here. Well, you might be right to think that that's a strange casting choice now, but there's still a whole other half to this equation, and it makes everything else fall perfectly into place.
Adjusting focus. Are you all right, pilot?
I think so. Wait, did you just call me pilot?
Let's run it back a bit. This is BT-7274. He's Lastimosa's Titan, but following the militia's crushing defeat on Typhon and Lastimosa's resultant death, his last wish is for Cooper to take control of BT. While Cooper is busy collecting batteries to get BT back up to full power, BT acts as your mission control, being surprisingly candid with his new pilot. It makes sense from a story perspective, given that he's a robot with no real reason to feel shame or trepidation, so when you get exchanges like this...
Pilot, I advise against turning yourself over to the IMC. Voice pattern analysis indicates they are lying.
Don't worry, BT. I'm not going anywhere.
Understood, but I do recommend you move. IMC salvage teams are not far away.
I mean, I'm not leaving you.
It is a common requirement for pilots to maneuver in situations without a linked Titan.
Which get their humor from how clueless BT is, along more sobering conversations like this one.
How long did you serve with Lastimosa?
Captain Lastimosa linked with me 973 days ago.
Sorry. You guys must have been close.
He was an excellent pilot, and a good friend.
You never once get the feeling that he isn't being completely genuine. It's an endearing trait, and it's written really well, but I think a big part of why these stand out stems from the way that BT's lines are delivered. Glenn Steinbaum really brings something special to the character of BT, and really to all robot characters in contemporary media. If you don't recognize his name, that's okay. As on top of this whole voice acting thing as I'm supposed to be, I didn't recognize it either. Which seems strange, right? His IMDb page lists a couple of roles in a few Marvel properties, but it seems to push his gigs doing advertisements more than anything regarding his voice acting roles. So, what gives? And more importantly, why does this work? Well, to put it simply, BT sounds like a guy who does movie trailers. I realize that sounds like a bit of a dig, especially when I'm talking about acting prowess, but there's a reason that this all fits together so well. BT speaks with a steady, measured confidence in everything that he says. He's not one of the endless Don LaFontaine voice matches you've heard a dozen times, with the same grizzled macho whisper hyping up an action movie, or the same desperate goofiness of someone trying to sell you on a comedy. BT speaks slowly and calmly, sounding more like a friend recommending something they'd know you'd like rather than some stranger making a soulless sales pitch to boost their numbers. It's clear that Glenn Steinbaum has a significant amount of experience in advertising, because it takes both talent and practice to be able to throw yourself behind a product, or in this case, a role in a video game, with this much warmth and earnesty. I did a little digging, and I managed to find his website and his demos, and yeah, he's done a lot of advertisements. A lot of advertisements. He's even got animation reels, and he has a pretty impressive range and variety of characters all throughout. Honestly, it's a bit of a shame that I haven't seen more studios casting him for character work in their games and animations and the like, because if his work here is any indication of his talents, he would do a great job. I'd love to see him in more stuff that lets him really lean into a character like he does with BT, especially if it lets him flex some of those other voice types that he's got on offer. Anyway, feel free to give his demos a listen if you'd like to hear for yourself. I've put links to them down in the description. The picture that I'm trying to paint here is that BT's voice never wavers or stumbles or sounds like he's ever unsure of a single thing that he's saying, and it's all without being cocky. And it works because it makes the dichotomy between the two main characters that much clearer. Cooper's emotional beats tend to hit much more explosively. His inexperience leads to confused muttering. He screams when he's in peril. When he's feeling especially sure of himself or sarcastic, it's palpable. Matt Mercer is more than capable of giving a well-thought-out performance that sweeps the entire emotional spectrum, and he's given dialogue and story events that let him really sink his teeth into these moments. BT, by contrast, is a robot. Certain lines are given a proportional share of weight to them when it's warranted, but for the most part, he tends to be the anchor for Cooper's more extreme shifts in tone and emotion. So when Cooper tries piloting BT for the first time, he only gets a brief explanation of how the weapon systems work before another enemy Titan soars down to take the two of them on. There's not a lot of time to mentally prepare yourself. So when BT says,
Yes, trust me.
You do. You've been given every reason to trust him. From a narrative perspective, BT has significantly more experience and understanding than Cooper, and he's hard-coded to protect the pilot at all costs, even to the detriment of his own safety. And from a performance perspective, BT's voice is always steady and firm. It's rare that he ever expresses something like fear or anger, and it makes those moments hit so much harder when he does. And, especially in terms of the voice acting, it's easy to imagine how a lot of these lines could have sounded a lot worse with someone who tried to swing too much dramatic flair into the reassurances of a machine. Glenn Steinbaum does a fantastic job at reserving himself for the vast majority of the game, and it's far from easy to stay that steady while still allowing some emotion to slip through. It's subtle, but it's always there, swimming just below the surface of an absolutely fantastic performance. Try to keep an ear out for it when I play a few snippets later on. The bond between BT and Cooper only gets stronger as the story progresses and Cooper's skill improves, with BT regularly citing improvements in their
Combat efficiency rating.
with what almost sounds like fatherly pride. The vast majority of the character development here comes from the brief, quippy exchanges between the two of them, whether they be for the sake of a laugh.
This Titan weapon is an advanced design and may give us a tactical advantage.
I think somebody's in love.
A human's concept of love requires admiration, attraction, devotion, and respect. Conclusion: I am 50% in love.
Or for some not-so-subtle foreshadowing.
Nice. Maybe next time you can throw me.
Noted.
These never once let up as you push through wave after wave of enemy foot soldiers and Titans alongside BT, gaining shaky wins against the IMC's hired mercenaries and pushing forward towards the big bosses at the end. All of these brief little moments keep adding up, one after the other, as Cooper and BT fight and grow with one another. It all culminates in this moment, right here, where Cooper needs to get across this massive gap to repair a communications link. There's no easy way to make it there, and BT is quick to inform him that the only way over is with a throw. It takes about 2 hours of gameplay to get to this point, and it really wouldn't have worked if it was placed earlier in the story. You've had plenty of time to fight alongside and joke with BT, gradually building up trust with every single story beat and conversation. You, as the player, want this to work. You want them to have this one breakthrough moment where all of the walls come crashing down and both Cooper and BT can really come into their own as Pilot and Titan. And when BT delivers those arc words,
Trust me.
you do.
I think I'm going to need some new underpants.
This technique ends up working so well that it becomes Cooper and BT's trademark move, given the nickname Fastball by the other supporting characters of the militia. It serves both as a pseudo-in-joke and as one of the foundational pillars of trust between the two. The relationship between Cooper and BT has evolved to a point where they have their own signature technique, and it works incredibly well up until the point where it suddenly doesn't. The IMC forces gain control of the Ark, an ancient alien source of near-limitless power, and it comes down to Cooper and BT to take it back before it can be used to destroy the militia planet of Harmony. The carrier ship that the Ark is on is in flames and crashing to the ground, and neither of the two protagonists are able to get it out in time before they become trapped. If that sounds like a lot of jargon, don't worry about it. The actions taken here matter significantly more than the set dressings. Knowing that they're about to make a crash landing directly behind enemy lines, BT takes control of the Ark, realizes that they're stuck, and gets in this last little exchange.
Get the Ark out of here!
Negative. We are trapped.
What are you doing?
Protocol 3. I will not lose another pilot. Brace for impact.
When Cooper and BT come to, they're being tortured to give up the Ark to Blisk, the leader of the opposing mercenaries. Cooper reacts with righteous indignation.
BT, open that hatch when this guy's dead.
But BT gives in to their demands, a bit more cognizant towards the risk of Cooper being killed. BT sends one final message to Cooper before he's destroyed, and he gives Cooper the Seer Kit with the last of his energy. A small set of survival gear that consists of little more than a smart pistol, a knife, and, most importantly, BT's personal data core. Essentially, his brain. So, these 3 pillars of trust have been firmly established by this point. The first-time piloting, the fastball, and the Seer Kit have all been built up and given to Cooper to conclude in this final, explosive sprint as everything falls apart around you. And something interesting happens here. For the entirety of this section, Cooper doesn't speak a single word. The support characters are chattering in his ear, of course, trying to coax him into responding and just giving directions when he refuses to reply, but Cooper is silent through all of it. And this, funny enough for a video about how great the voice work in this game is, was the smartest thing they could have done. See, there's an art to knowing exactly when less is more. Cooper could have been screaming through gritted teeth, grim resolve dripping off of every word, and Matt Mercer would have done a great job doing it. But because of how well the foundations of trust have been built up between BT and the player, there's no need for Cooper to say anything. All of the rage and despair and determination that Cooper feels is mirrored exactly in the person playing the game. You've become this invested in this world and these characters and all of the relationships you've forged and built up, and now it's being taken away from you all at once. You want to push forward. You want to stampede through halls of enemies without a single one of them having a chance to slow you down. You don't have time to aim or think or speak because you've lost something you're invested in. and you're not going to let go of it without a fight. Fortunately, the game isn't that cruel, and the final gauntlet only lasts for a merciful few minutes before Cooper manages to get out in the open. Now, with the IMC's defenses squarely broken, Cooper calls down his new Titan and wastes no time installing BT's data core into the new chassis. And, for the first time,
Hello, Jack.
BT calls Cooper by his first name. This is the absolute peak of trust established by Titanfall 2. Everything after this is the falling action, so to speak. Without wishing to spoil the final endgame events, everything that happens after this doesn't develop any further on the already established bonds between Cooper and BT. Rather, they serve more as the natural conclusion of a story that harkens back to the classics about a boy and his dog. Or, in this case, a boy and his giant robot. Titanfall 2 is a fantastic game, and one that was woefully overshadowed by the mediocrity of its past and a willfully malicious release campaign by its publisher. It's impossible to overstate just how much I encourage you to play it for yourself and experience all of the little conversational branches and gameplay variants on your own terms. I've really only just scratched the surface on what this game has to offer in terms of both the story and gameplay, and I believe that it serves as an excellent modern example of the heights a project can reach when everyone involved decides to really start experimenting. Matt Mercer is always a delight, but Glenn Steinbaum was a real surprise here. I'm really glad that he managed to secure the role of BT, because I can't imagine anyone else pulling it off as well as he has. He managed to keep up the low-key, ever-calm robot persona all the way through to the very end of the game, and it contrasted incredibly well with Matt Mercer's much more explosive performance. The two of them work great together, and I'd like to see them collaborate again at some point in the future. I think there's a lot of untapped potential here, and any studio would be missing out if they weren't willing to at least consider both of them for any other starring roles. I think it's only right that Respawn got a lot of good press coming off the heels of this game leading into their next title, Apex Legends, as well as exposing many more people to the talents of all the designers, writers, and voice actors on offer. There was a lot that went into this game, and boiling it down to just the accomplishments of a few individuals would be a disservice to the project as a whole. Titanfall 2 was definitely a different spin on a lot of classic formulas, but it managed to subvert just as many expectations in a way that was both refreshing and satisfying. And, in many ways, it serves as a perfect example of how trust isn't just given. It's earned. Hey there, thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. I know it was significantly longer than most of the stuff I've put out on this channel, but I hope that I was able to keep you entertained all throughout. If you liked it, please feel free to subscribe to my channel for future episodes, and be sure to check out my Twitter where I regularly post updates and low-quality memes. This first episode of the Voice Actors Copybook wound up being a lot longer than I intended, and I'm not sure how long future installments are going to be. I've got a ton of ideas written out and ready to go, so the next episode should be out sometime within the next 3 weeks or so. I'm not sure. There's a lot more learning I have to do before I can really commit to a schedule, especially with all of the stuff that I already have to keep up with in my daily life, so we'll see where we wind up a few months from now. Anyway, thanks again for sticking around to the very end. Here's a little teaser for what's coming next. See you soon.